So nivritti, you can go ahead. Okay, I had to go ahead, sorry. So nivritti literally means retirement or giving up. Now, in this case, I talk about frustration can be a beginning point for realization. But there's a difference between frustration and renunciation. Frustration means the desire is there, but the opportunity for indulgence is not there. I want it, but I can't get it. That is frustration. Whereas renunciation means I don't want it only, because I have got something higher. Now frustration can be a beginning point from where renunciation may emerge. Just like say I talked about the 2-story building, 2 level. So I am frustrated with what is here. I am not getting it. I am not getting satisfied even if I get it. So I start looking for something more. And then when I get something more, then I give this up. So renunciation means I don't want it. So frustration can be a beginning point, but frustration alone is not renunciation. And if when we are indulging in sense pleasures, or when we are giving into the anarthas, there are times when we all get frustrated. But that frustration alone, if we assume that it is renunciation, then we wonder what happened. Again, next time the temptation comes, we relapse. So the nature of Maya is that we all become frustrated, but Maya never makes us hopelessly frustrated. Maya keeps us hopefully frustrated. Yeah, you did not get it now, but you'll get something in future. Maybe future. And that way, that hope keeps us going on. So even when the frustration comes, that frustration doesn't automatically lead to renunciation. It is, okay, I did not get this now, so I'll give it up. But then after some time, if an opportunity comes, I'm open for it. So that way we are not rising to a higher consciousness. It is, so quite often when there is, we could say there is gratification and there is frustration. In both of these, we are still centered on the sense object. Centered on the object, thinking that, oh, I want it and I'll enjoy it. And, oh, I don't want it. It's causing me misery, I'll give it up. But still that it is still the center of our consciousness. So nivritti in terms of renunciation is not simply frustration with sense indulgence. There's something more that is involved over there. So now, the mind has different modes. And the 3 modes we can understand in this frame of reference is one way of looking at it. That in the mode of ignorance, we just thinking. And thinking also in an uncontrolled way. The word contemplation is often used in a positive sense, deep contemplation. But Prabhupada also used it in a negative sense, dhyato vichayan pumsaha. When we contemplate on the sense objects. So if there's only contemplation and no action, people are in their own fantasy world, then that is often in the mode of ignorance. Aprakasho apravrittischa. Krishna says the characteristic of the mode of passion, mode of ignorance. He says in 14.13 is, there is no illumination, no thoughtful contemplation and no action also. Na apravrittischa. So in the mode of passion, there is first action and then there is contemplation. We speak something, hey, why did I speak that? Like that. And in the mode of goodness, there is a balance of contemplation and action. We are thoughtful and then we are active also. So why are we talking about this right now here? Because renunciation is in the mode of goodness. Frustration is in the mode of ignorance. When somebody is frustrated, they are, oh, I couldn't get it, I'll not seek it. But they're not doing anything positive to rise to a higher level of consciousness. So saying no to something is never sustainable. We have to say yes to something else. So in the mode of ignorance, there is, oh, this is so bad, I want to give it up. This is so bad, I want to give it up. There's contemplation. But okay, after giving it up, what are we going to take up? That is not there. So that's why frustration is not sustained. I get frustrated with one thing, but after some time, again I do it. Parikshit Maharaj talks about this, that Kvachit nivartate abhatrat, puna kvachit charati tat punah. Prayashita mathav partam, manye kunjara shauchavat. Sometimes we indulge, sometimes we give up. This is like bathing of elephant. So basically, this abstinence which may happen because of frustration, that is not sustainable. And that happens because we are at that particular time at least in the mode of ignorance. Not doing anything positive to rise to a higher level of consciousness. So now when you talk about the word nivrutti actually means to retire. In Hindi, in Sanskrit, they say, if somebody retires, they say he has become nivrutta now. So nivrutta, retirement. And Krishna uses this word nivrutti, nirmana moha jita sanga dosha, adhyatma nitya vinivrutta kamaha. So vinivrutta, in a special way, completely retired. So actually, desires themselves, they won't retire till we tire of them. So they will keep coming back. They'll keep coming back. Even if we decide, I don't want them, still they will keep coming back. So it's like, say, if we found a stray dog and we decided to adopt that dog. And then afterwards we were told, this dog has got rabies. It's a very dangerous dog. Don't keep it with you. Don't keep it with you. Now we may tell that dog, go away. Go away. Now the dog, if the dog has become attached to us and we have been affectionate to the dog will just think, I'm playing with you. Go away. The dog will look, well, go a little away and come back again. Go away. We'll come back again. Go away. We'll come back again. Then 10 times we'll say no to the dog, and 11 times, oh, this dog is so nice. We'll just fondle it and caress it, maybe hug it. And think, oh, my master loves me. And then again 11 times say, go away. And this is playing. So what happens with us is, even if we say no to our lower desires, it's like that the dog doesn't go away. And we may say no a few times, and then once we say yes, again the desire comes back. So it's only when that dog understands this master doesn't want me only. No matter what I do, it is not going to pay any attention to me. It's not going to give me anything. Then it will go away. So similarly for us, when we have to give up some indulgence, quite often we give it up, but then again we indulge in it. And then it stays with us, it doesn't go away. So therefore, the renunciation is often a slow process, and it is not always a straight process. Sometimes there are twists, and sometimes there are maybe U-turns also. But we are meant to go towards that. So nivrutti is something which we get tired of that desire. I don't want this. And that, what happens with us is, when we are frustrated, we are not tired of the desire. We are tired of the fact that we could not get the object of the desire. So the desire is still nice, and I would like to do this, but just I am not able to do it. So one is being tired of the effort to get the object, and so I say I don't want it. But when in future the object seems to be available without much effort, hey, come on, I'll do it. So this tiredness of material desires, of anarthas, will happen when there is attraction to something higher. So that's a nivrutti has to be sustained. The Bhagavatam in the 3rd canto in Kapila section says, Prasangam ajaram pasham. Jara is old age. So ajara is that which doesn't grow old. So prasanga is attachment. So attachment is like a pasha, is like a noose or a shackle, which is ageless. So our body grows old, but our desires don't necessarily grow old. We get exhausted, but our desires don't get exhausted. When we stop sense indulgence, after we indulge, that is not because the desire has gone away. It's quite often because the capacity is not there right now. And then say, I may eat a lot, and then now enough. I give the example for gulab jamun. Now you take something. But tomorrow, if somebody offers me gulab jamun, yeah, give me. So at that time, it's not that there's a renunciation, oh, now it is enough, because now the capacity is not there. But the desire itself has not gone away. So the desires often exhaust us, but they don't get exhausted themselves. They just stay on and on and on. And this way, they keep binding us. So nivrutti, so why am I talking about Yeah.
What is the verse, the Bhagavatam?
Oh, it is a famous verse where it talks about redirection of the heart to Krishna, we know devotees. Prasangam ajaran pasham atmana kavayo vidu sa eva sadhushu kruto moksha dwaram apavritam. So it is. I think that word comes only once in the Bhagavatam, or once or twice. Yeah, it is 3:25:20. It talks about how only when we become attached to devotees, sa eva sadhushu kruto moksha dwaram apavritam. Attachment to the material is very difficult to give up, but when we become attached to devotees, then the doors to liberation open. So I'm focusing on the first part, ajaram. That the attachments themselves don't go away so easily. Now, in our conditioned stage, this is our dilemma. That we can't get the higher taste unless we give up the lower taste. But we can't give up the lower taste unless we get the higher taste. So what do? Now, of course, like any blanket statement that is made, this is not absolutely true. We actually, to some extent, it is true that if we are obsessed with lower taste, if I'm constantly thinking of getting some sense object for my pleasure, then I can't think about Krishna. So in that sense, if we are obsessed with the lower taste, we can't get the higher taste. It's not that Krishna is not accessible to me in the sense that Krishna is keeping himself far away from me. But rather, I cannot access Krishna. If I am attached to something, I may be in the temple taking darshan of Krishna, but I will think of my attachment. So I cannot think about Krishna. So in that sense, as long as the lower taste is strongly pulling us, we can't get the higher taste. And at the same time, unless we get the higher taste, we can't give up the lower taste. So if this is the only thing I have, how can I give this up? This is what has given me pleasure in my life, and this is the only pleasure I know. So we are caught in the situation where we can't get the higher taste and we can't give up the lower taste. So in this situation, how do we move forward? So actually, it begins with the intelligence. So Jiva Goswami explained in such sandarbhas that what Preeti does for the Siddhas, Buddhi has to do for the Sadhakas. That means Preeti is affection. Affection for Krishna keeps the Siddhas, those who are perfected beings, it keeps them on the spiritual level. They are naturally attracted to Krishna, they think about Krishna and they stay absorbed in him. But for us, that kind of Preeti, that kind of affection or attraction to Krishna is not so much there. So then Buddhi is required. So with Buddhi, with intelligence, we can keep ourselves on the spiritual platform. So evam buddhe param buddhva samsthabhyatmanam atmana jahishatrum mahabahu kamarupam durasadam. In 3.43 the Bhagavad Gita Krishna says, evam buddhe, even with the intelligence, param buddhva, understand yourself to be transcendental, to be param. And samsthabhya atmanam atmana, fix the mind on the soul, fix it on the spiritual level. So it is with the intelligence that we need to begin. So what does it mean to begin with the intelligence? With the intelligence, we need to be convinced that the higher taste is actually higher and the lower taste is actually lower. This is a lower pleasure, this is a temporary pleasure. This is not going to satisfy me. So with our intelligence, we need to get this conviction. And to the extent we get the conviction with the intelligence, to that extent we will get the rationale to resist it. So, and with the intelligence, we also get the higher taste. Get the higher taste and understand that this higher taste is actually higher. So, I talked about what is sense pleasure. There is there's the sense and there's the sense object. And there's the contact of senses with the sense objects. And that gives us some pleasure. And most of the times we think that because I don't have a good enough sense object, that's why I'm not getting the pleasure. Somebody wants to eat and enjoy. Oh, I don't get good enough food to eat. If I could get a free coupon to a 5-star hotel, I would have such a good time. But most of the time we think the sense objects I don't have the sense objects, or the sense objects I have are not good enough. That's why I'm not getting the pleasure. But even then, actually the contact of the senses and sense objects, it's always going to be temporary. So, how do we understand this lower taste is lower? I use an acronym TIME. TIME. That is temporary, illusory, miserable enjoyment. So, temporary, illusory, miserable enjoyment. At the end of the session, we'll give you this PPT, those of you who want. I'll add it over there. I don't think is it there right now? Something, good. I'm supposed to go to the next one. I think it got deleted in the transfer somehow. Sorry about that. So, temporary, illusory, miserable enjoyment. What does it mean? Temporary. How do we understand that the lower taste is actually lower? We think that because the sense object is not there, so I can't enjoy. But even if the sense object were there, actually the capacity of the senses to enjoy itself is limited. And it can never be made unlimited. So in that sense, it is always going to be temporary. Whatever it is, if it's greed, I want this house, I want this car, I want this phone. I get the latest phone. Yes, but then the attractiveness of the phone is because of its newness. And after some time, the newness goes away and there's not much pleasure over there. So the temporariness is inescapable. That's the first thing. Illusory means sometimes we chase after an object. Okay, I'll start with a simple example. Say, if we hear that there's a feast, and if we hear there's a feast, and in that feast there is going to be pizza, and say, I like pizza very much. So then I go there and I want the pizza. When will I get the pizza? When will I get the pizza? And then I go there and I found that rumor was false. There is no pizza only over there. So then all that I got was the craving. So basically when we seek sense pleasure, there are three possibilities. One is we seek it and we don't get it at all. So then there is simply misery over there. So TIME, temporary, illusory, miserable. So if I crave for it and I don't get it at all, and that's misery. There are so many of our desires we can think about, we crave for them, but we don't get them. And that craving simply causes us misery. The second is, we go there and there is a pizza. And then we get it, and when we want to eat it, it's badly cooked. So, it just doesn't taste good. And come on, it looks so good, it must be good, but it's not good. So then it illusory means it appears as the pleasure is there, but actually it is not there. Say there's a wonderful cake that is made, but in the cake instead of sugar somebody has put salt. Then the cake looks like a wonderful cake, but it tastes, what is this? So like that, sometimes we get the object. First is we don't get the object only. Second is we get the object, but the object disappoints us. The object disappoints us. The third is, we get the object and it's enjoyable also. But what after that? The enjoyment is temporary. Now, no enjoyment at the material level lasts for long. So, in this way, either we don't get the enjoyment only and that leads to misery. We get it, it doesn't live up to our expectations and that's why it's illusory. We get it, it gives us some pleasure, but then that pleasure doesn't last for long. That's why it's temporary. So, this analysis, temporary, illusory, miserable. That acronym is mine, but there's three possibilities. This is for Vishwanath Chakravarti's purport to the verse Tadvai Dhanus in the 15th chapter of the first canto. He talks about worldly pleasures. He gives three examples over there which are given in the Bhagavatam, and based on that he gives this analysis. So basically the verse says that Arjuna is saying, I got the same bow, this is the same chariot, but earlier I defeated everyone and now just some infidel cowherd defeated me. How did that happen? He says, because Krishna has left. And because Krishna has left, he says, therefore my potency is like bhasmam bhutam. If you put fuel on ashes, it's of no use. Or it's like money produced by a magician. Kukaraddam. And so he gives various examples over there, and in that connection, Vishwanath Thakur gives this analysis. So basically, this is just one analysis. We all can do different kinds of analysis by which, with our intelligence, we get convinced that the lower taste is lower. So at different points in our life, there are different maybe philosophical understandings or personal experiences or some analytical frames by which we get to see this is really not worth it. That understanding, when we get it, that is very valuable. And how the higher taste is higher, that I'll talk when I come to the next session about Artha Pravritti. I'll talk about Artha at that time. So now, with our intelligence, what do we do? And I said we need the intelligence, but the intelligence alone is not enough. It has to function. So there is impulse which just rises within us. And even if I understand the lower taste is lower, still the impulse will rise. So if an alcoholic understands that alcohol is bad for me, I want to give up alcohol. But next time they pass by a bar, next time they see somebody else drinking, that impulse will come, I want to drink. So impulse is what rises. It can rise from some external perception, or it can arise also from some inner recollection. It rises within us. And when the impulse becomes intent, is I am going to drink, then that is the time we fall. So in our inner world, the impulse is something which rises without our doing anything. It just rises because of external perception or inner recollection. And we can't do away with the impulses. They will rise within us. But when they become intent, that is the time when we succumb. So in between impulse and intent is intelligence. So let intelligence guard the path from between impulse and intent. So impulse rises within me. So impulse is something which is rising within me. I want to eat this. I want to watch this. I want to buy this. Then the intent, that impulse comes. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Why don't you eat this? Why don't you watch this? That is the impulse that is coming in. The intent is, I will do it. So when it comes to the level of intent, then we will relapse. But in between the impulse and the intent can be the intelligence. The impulse arises, but I don't succumb to it. I don't let it become my intent, my intention. I don't decide to do it. So this intelligence becomes strong through scripture. So when we study scriptures, the scriptures help us understand the nature of material pleasure, nature of spiritual pleasure, the nature in which our own mind works. And then just because the desire has come within me, that doesn't mean I have to act on it. If the desire comes, if the desire will stay for some time, it will go away. So we don't have to identify with that desire. We don't have to necessarily indulge in that desire. So temptations may come, we don't have to welcome. So temptations may come, but they'll come, they'll stay for some time. If we don't entertain them, they will go away. But if we identify with them, we make them our intention, then we will succumb. So nivritti means, at this we are talking about detachment or giving up. We'll talk about taking up of something in the next session. But at this stage, giving up means we focus on this principle that the intelligence has to be strong. Krishna also says, Buddhi nashat pranashyati. He says, when intelligence falls, we fall. In 2.62-63, when he talks about the sequence of how the soul relapses, the intelligence is like the protector for us. Now, when sometimes, so I'm talking about how, at the previous slide I talked about how the intelligence can stop the impulse from becoming an intent. But sometimes we just get overpowered. And when we get overpowered, at that time we may just, I'm like this only, I'm hopeless, I'm fallen, I can never give this up. So this kind of thinking is actually the mind's deception. No, suppose, say somebody, say we are living a nice law-abiding life, and a friend comes along and says, "Come, let's rob a bank." Says, "What? Come, let's rob a bank." Says, "No, I have a foolproof plan. We will get the money and we'll slip away and nobody will catch us." And then that person persuades us and we go along and rob the bank. And then when the police come, that person just disappears and we get caught. And then when we are brought in the court, and then we find that person is sitting as a judge. You are a criminal, you should go to jail. So, our mind is this double role player. The mind first says, "Come on, why don't you do this?" The mind proposes to us, "Come on, do this." And then when we end up doing it, the mind says, "You are a hopeless fool." So the mind allures us into wrongdoing and then condemns us also. So what happens? Even when say we had made a resolution, okay, I'm not going to do this, and then we did it anyway. Then we may say, "Oh, there's so many times I just have no willpower. I'm just hopeless." Instead of thinking like this, we can actually do a little analysis. At that time, the mind offered some rationalization. How did the mind persuade us? We had our intention, I'm not going to do it, and then we did it. So the mind offers some rationalization by which it sidelines our intelligence. So what was that rationalization? And then like one rationalization, a little doesn't matter. So then when we understand what the rationalization is, then we can counter that rationalization. A little doesn't matter? Yes, that may be true, but it may not be true also. The regulation is fine, but in some cases, if there is no even the regulated indulgence can lead to unregulated indulgence. So whatever is the rationalization that the mind uses, everybody is doing it. Well, everybody is going to do it, but everybody is going to get the karmic reactions for it. So just because everybody is doing it doesn't make it necessarily right. So we have to, when we study the philosophy, when we are saying we use the intelligence, one is we use the intelligence to avoid the impulse from becoming intent. But the other is, even we act on it, the next time, what do we do? Okay, what made me do it? How did the mind rationalize? And how can I resist that rationalization? So if I have a counter to that rationalization ready, then the next time the mind will not be able to fool us in the same way. My mind keeps fooling me. Yes, it keeps fooling me, but there is some trick it uses for fooling. And if we can understand that trick, then we can counter it. So I'll talk about, from the transcendental perspective in bhakti, we'll talk about this a little later, how bhakti can protect us, but even sattva guna also can protect us to some extent. So usually sattva guna, mode of goodness can also protect us. So this is when our mind goes into illusion. Say I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, maybe I will buy this, I'll watch this, I will eat this. And our mind goes into a fantasy world. Oh, this will be so enjoyable. And I want it. And I'm going to get it. Who can stop me from getting it? The mind is going into fantasy imagining. At that time, we can drag the mind back to reality. So, when we will be sitting in a temple or we'll be sitting in a place where there's no temptation, but our mind is going into fantasy world, which is going to impel us towards temptation. So at that time, we just bring ourselves back to reality. What does it mean, bring ourselves back to reality? Now the senses can be the pathway to illusion. But we can go, as I said earlier, we can go into illusion in two ways. One is through the perception by the senses. The other is through the recollection and the imagination by the mind. That means sometimes I see a sense object and I get a desire for it. Sometimes there is no sense object, like an alcoholic sees an alcohol bottle or sees a bar and desires to go and drink. Or that alcoholic is sitting in a home itself peacefully, but then there's a desire coming. Oh, memory comes up. Hey, I drank. It was so nice. I want to drink again. So it comes up from the mind, from the recollection. So especially when we are practicing bhakti, we are living in devotee association to some extent, then it is often the mind's imagination which starts agitating us. So at that time, see, our consciousness, the soul's consciousness comes, the soul is here, the subtle body is here, the physical body is here. Soul's consciousness comes from the subtle body through the physical body to the outer world. So now if in the outer world sometimes there is no temptation, but in the inner world there is temptation. The mind is fantasizing something. So now to take the soul's consciousness directly to the spiritual level is not so easy. So if you can just get out of the mind, that means get the consciousness from the fantasy at the level of the mind to the reality at the level of the senses. What does it mean to get it to the reality at the level of senses? That means we just become aware of our surroundings. What am I doing? Okay, what am I doing? I'm sitting in a temple. What am I doing thinking like this? Okay, what is there in this temple? Here there is Krishna. So just observing the world around us, becoming more aware of the world around us, that itself can drag us out of the temptation. So basically the more we imagine, the more we get captivated. But if we can get the consciousness out of the fantasy to the reality, and the reality is not tempting, then that can... So for example, if I have a picture, if I am getting agitated by something, and there's a picture of Srila Prabhupada over there. So I just look at the picture and start thinking about that picture, or even verbalizing. This is the picture of Prabhupada. The Prabhupada's hand is raised, and he is gesturing to convey some philosophical point. He is sitting on the floor as he usually sits, and there is a library behind him, library of books behind him, and this looks like a rustic setting. So probably this might be in Mayapur or Vrindavan, I don't know. It's Mayapur. So, so basically, when we direct our consciousness towards a reality which takes us out of the fantasy of the mind, then that itself can protect us. Because once we get consumed by the fantasy, we are lost. So, the mode of goodness is characterized by awareness. And awareness can progress at various levels. First awareness is awareness of distractedness or distraction. Oh, I'm in a temple, instead of thinking of Krishna, I'm thinking of something else. That awareness itself is the beginning. Then there can be even awareness of material reality is also important. Like sometimes we become absent-minded. I take out my specs, I put it over here, and then I start searching, where is my specs? We all have heard about this kind of absent-minded people. So they're not aware. So even awareness of material reality, just being aware, being attentive, that is also in the mode of goodness. So first I become aware of my of the distraction. Oh, I'm getting distracted. Then I become aware of the reality around me. And then gradually I become aware of spiritual reality. So in that way, here, why we are talking about this level of dealing with it, because right now we are not talking about Artha Pravrutti. So I am not focused on Krishna directly. But even at the material level, we can deal with temptations by just coming to the mode of goodness. In the mode of passion, the mind takes us into fantasy land. And that's where our imagination runs haywire and it captivates us. But if we can just get ourselves back to reality, okay, I am so and so, I have this responsibility, I have this service, and I have taken these vows, I have to do this. Just get ourselves back to reality. And one of the easiest way to get us back to reality is to focus on some spiritual stimuli within our environment. As I said, look at a picture of Prabhupada, a picture of Krishna. Just try to focus on that, verbalize that, hear about that, think about that. So ultimately we want to direct our consciousness to the spiritual level. But even getting it to the current reality, it is relatively easier than directly spiritualizing it on sometimes. And then doing that can help us to resist the temptation also. Because once we come out of fantasy land, then in the reality, the imagination doesn't go so haywire and we are able to check it. So this I mentioned this point already, that to decide to not think of something is to think of it. So we cannot simply live by abstinence. We need to rise somewhere higher. That's why renunciation requires redirection. Without that, renunciation cannot be sustained. And that redirection, that artha pravritti, is what I'll talk about in the next session. So I'll summarize what I spoke just now. Today, so we're talking about the second session where we talk about nivrutti. And nivrutti, I talked about how the frustration means I can't get it, whereas renunciation means I don't want it. So in frustration, I still have the desire, but just because the object is not there, so I'm tired of the effort to get the object. But the desire, I'm not tired of the desire. Renunciation means I'm tired of the desire. Unless I'm tired of the desire will not go away. Like a pet dog, even if I push it away, it will keep coming back till I show it unambiguously that I don't want it. So like that, the desires which we have petted earlier and fondled, we have to say firm no to them. Only then they will go away. And then attachments are ageless. They exhaust us, but they themselves don't get exhausted. Temporarily we may say enough, but after some time, again, when the desire comes up, the opportunity comes up, again we indulge. So the problem is that the dilemma is that when we can't get the higher taste unless we give up the lower taste, and we can't give up the lower taste unless we get the higher taste. So the way out of the dilemma is through the intelligence. With the intelligence, we understand that the lower taste is lower and the higher taste is higher. And one reflection for understanding that the lower taste is lower is the acronym TIME. TIME. What is that? Temporary, illusory, miserable, enjoyment. It's not enjoyment actually in that sense. But so when I crave for something, I don't get it at all. Then only I get the misery of craving. That's miserable. I crave for it, I get it, but it doesn't live up to my expectations. Then it's illusory. I crave for it, I get it, but it doesn't last for long. It's temporary. So by reflections like this, we can redirect use our intelligence to check the impulse when it rises. The impulse will rise because of external perception or internal recollection. But when it gets converted into intent, that's when we fall. But if the intelligence can stand as a guard in between, then the impulse won't get converted into intent. And in that connection, I talked about this when the impulse arises within us, then impulse takes us into fantasy land. So if we are diverted into illusion, then in fantasy, then the sensory reality around us can also ground us, get us out of the fantasy. So by focusing on awareness of our material reality, and then with some spiritual stimuli within that material reality, we can get out of the fantasy land where if we go inside, then we will succumb. So that way, by being in the mode of goodness, or by some thought exercises by which we can bring ourselves back to the mode of goodness, that means as we become aware of our circumstances, then we can protect ourselves from passion and the illusion that comes with passion. Now, ultimately, we can't just not think of something. So renunciation requires redirection. And that artha pravritti we'll discuss in the second half of our session in the afternoon. So are there any questions or comments? Yes, Manish. Okay. Very good. Okay. Okay, fine.
This is kind of along the string from the last session,
Okay.
but in regards to if I focus on something, even if it's something that I would like to get rid of, then by focusing on it too much, I can get the thing that I want, that I don't want even more. Even if I'm saying like I don't want to drink.
Correct.
But so can you talk about some balance between focusing on it too much, but then going the opposite way and thinking, well, like naturally, and it should come naturally. I don't want to focus on it too much. There's like the flip side of that.
Okay,
Can you
yeah.
focus on?
Yeah, okay.
Can you talk about balancing?
Yeah. So on one side, we may say that if I just keep thinking of not doing it, I'll end up doing it because the desire will come up. But then we also have to be aware we have to be aware that I have to give this up. So I'll give two examples. Say if I have got I had a shoulder pain a few days ago. Now as soon as I put weight on the hand, suddenly it causes pain. Now, if I'm constantly going to think about, I got a shoulder pain, I got a shoulder pain, I got a shoulder pain, then I'm going to be in misery. Now, I have to think about other things and I have to go on doing what I can, even with the shoulder pain. But then, on the occasions when I have to get up, at that time I have to be aware, hey, this shoulder, I have this pain in the shoulder, I cannot put weight on the shoulder. So, that awareness has to be there so that when that pain can get aggravated, I don't aggravate it. But at the same time, it's not that I have to constantly think about it. If I'm constantly thinking about it, I increase my misery. If I don't think about it at all, then also I put weight on it and I cause misery to myself. So in that sense, the awareness has to be there, but we could say the constant awareness or the obsession needn't be there. So like that, if I have a particular, like if an alcoholic is there, now, if say this is the office, this is the home, and there is a bar in between, which the alcoholic has always frequented. Now, if the alcoholic is going to pass by that, then the desire is going to come. And the craving may become strong and the alcoholic may be pulled in. Sometimes the alcoholics are also told that, I'm using an example of alcohol because one of my friends is like a counselor in Alcoholic Anonymous. And I found many of the principles that they talk about apply to us also in our particular conditionings. So they say that you may need to take a longer route, some other route. Don't go by that bar. Even if it takes more time, just avoid that. So we have to be aware of the weakness that we have, and we have to make sure that we don't aggravate it. So just constant contemplation on it can aggravate it, but just indiscriminate recklessness can also aggravate it. So the balance will be that we become aware of the triggers, the situations where that weakness, that anartha may get aggravated, and we avoid those. We avoid those situations. But we don't focus on just, no, I won't do this, I won't do this. No, focus on something positive. So, as I said, when we use our intelligence here to understand why this lower taste is lower. So, at that time also, to some extent, we have to think about it. But this is, we are thinking when we are in the mode of goodness, using scripture as our guide. So, at that time, we are basically equipping ourselves to say no whenever the impulse arises. So we definitely need to think about it adequately enough so that we have the reasoning, so that we have the intellectual resources to say no when the impulse arises. But we don't have to be thinking about it constantly. Does it answer the question? Thank you. Yes.
You said that desires won't retire, and so we tire on them.
Yeah.
Wasn't this Daksha's philosophy when faced with Narada Muni inspiring his sons to take up devotional service?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand, yeah. So desires won't retire till we tire of them. Was this Daksha's philosophy? Daksha's philosophy was somewhat different. It was that unless we indulge in the desires, we won't tire of them. His point was that indulgence is the only way to realization. Indulgence is the way to renunciation. No, we have to, so now we have to tire of desires. Now how that will happen, that will vary from person to person. For some people they may indulge lifelong and still they may not tire of it. Some people may hear and hey, this is not what I need to do. So the point is that we need to get something higher in our life. So whether now the higher taste is higher, I can get that conviction simply by hearing, or sometimes I may get that by experiencing. But we need to tire of that desire. So Daksha's philosophy is that to tire of the desire, we need to indulge in the desire. That is not my point. My point is that we have to come to that level. It may be through indulgence, it may be through direct focus on Krishna. But the point is we have to become tired of desires. Okay. Yes, Madhuri? You had a question. Oh, you got the mic here? Okay, fine.
There's two quotes or two verses that are consecutive in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Bhajan Rahasya, which is his commentary on Harinam Chintanam.
Yeah.
And it describes how one who fails to try and free himself from anarthas meets only with misfortune in this lifetime and doesn't get the mercy of the Lord. And then the next verse describes how it almost seems contradictory. It says, on one's own, one can't free himself from anarthas. But if he cries to the holy name for several days, then the holy name will remove all the anarthas from his heart. It's a big statement, but what I'm wondering, a lot of what we're dealing with, what you've presented, is on the strength of intelligence, and certainly that's important. But then,
correct. Yeah. Okay.
That whole aspect of, it actually...
I'm going to talk about it in Artha Pravritti.
Okay.
So I will definitely,
All right.
I'll talk about that. Definitely. Thank you. Yeah. Shesha Pravritti.
Thank you. So I have the mic, and I just wanted to say that I'm appreciating so much of this. And the Prabhupada had said, that we have to be conscious before Krishna conscious, and that this awareness of material reality, it makes a whole lot of sense. It just makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Because then we can wake ourselves up, it seems. That was my simple comments.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shesha Prabhu, you had a question in the earlier session? Yeah, the mic is.
I just along the same lines that Janasini was saying, it sort of leads into what you're going to talk about next.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm anticipating that.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Yes, come on.
Be careful.
You can just speak, I'll repeat the question.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, you mentioned, you gave an example of the shoulder pain. You said we don't have to pay too much attention to it, but when there is a need, we need to pay attention. But the problem is to realize that when there is a need to pay attention. So is there anything that we visualize or something that we need to keep to make us be aware of the situation?
Okay. So, when we need to become aware that there is danger, so how can we remind ourselves of that so that we can protect ourselves? Like to remember that I do have shoulder pain, I cannot put weight on this leg. So sometimes it's just by experience. I put weight and then I realize, hey, this is too much pain. So like that, we are a little reckless and we expose ourselves to some perceptions, some sense objects, and then we get agitated. Hey, why did I get into this at all? I didn't have to get into this. So broadly speaking, if we become more, one of the characteristics of the mode of goodness is awareness. So we become more aware of what makes us distracted. When we are chanting, actually we are trying to fix the mind on Krishna. And we may say, my chanting was totally distracted today. Okay, that's one thing. But instead of just getting frustrated by chanting was distracted, we can think, okay, what was the distraction? Now there can be unlimited distractions, but if you look at our overall mind, there are certain specific distractions. Maybe we have some financial worries, we have somebody in their family is sick or whatever. So then we understand, okay, these are things which my mind worries about. This is what I get distracted about. And then we can make some plans. If I'm worried about finances, then maybe just before I start chanting, I can read some verse, or I can keep in mind some verse which talks about how Krishna protects his devotees, yoga kshemam vahamyaham, or whatever. I'm just giving an example here of something which we need to, instead of just saying I am distracted, we need to analyze our distractions and see how to deal with them also. One part is we want to become attracted to Krishna. Attraction to Krishna is going to take a good amount of time. So we need to also analyze our distractions, and by analyzing how can we deal with those distractions, we can decide that. Again, we take shelter of scripture only to deal with it, but scriptural wisdom, if it is customized or applied to that particular situation, that becomes more relevant for us. So that way we can, by analyzing what particular distractions trouble us, we can actually deal with them. So that's one aspect to it. The other aspect is that the over a period of time, if we are serious about doing a particular activity, then naturally we just learn what is unfavorable to that, and we avoid that. So, say if a student is, if a particular exam is very important for us, and then we are going, I want to pass this exam, and if a person has really decided that seriously, then they will not get distracted. Somebody says, come to a movie, let's go to a party. Normally they would have done that, but at that time the seriousness of purpose is that exam, that itself gives them the impetus for saying no. So like that, for us, if we can have some serious commitment in Krishna Bhakti, then that itself gives us the impetus that I don't want to go in this direction. So usually, as I said earlier also, it is not the first mistake that is the problem. So quite often it's not just the perception of sense objects, or it's not even the recollection of the sense object that is the problem. It's the imagination after that, it's the contemplation after that is the problem. So if I am just busy in my service to Krishna, so the shoulder example is not fully appropriate, because I need to use the shoulder and sometimes I just have to put weight. But in the case of in the case of sense indulgence, sense perception is unavoidable. In that sense, I can say that I have to put weight. But contemplation and sense perception is not necessary. So if I have to, just like if I'm driving in a car, I have to be aware of who is coming from where. But I just don't have to turn and look at what is where or where. I have to keep my vision focused. So if I'm driving fast, I'm aware who's coming from this side, who's coming from this side. But I'm just moving forward. And it's not that when I'm driving along the road, I'll turn around and look this way, oh, who is coming over there. No, I'll keep my vision fixed. Especially if I'm not just going on a sightseeing tour. If I'm going on a purposeful drive somewhere, then I'll just focus on the road. So like that, if our life is activated with a higher purpose, then even when the desire comes up, at that time we won't dwell on it. We'll just, yes, that's enough. It's come, I'm not interested in it, we move on. So that way, we can avoid the aggravation of the perception or the recollection. Perception or the recollection. And that way we can move on. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
I just want to know what you're going to cover the next session.
Okay. So in Artha, I'm going to talk about how Krishna is the all-attractive person, how everything attractive in this world actually reflects a spark of Krishna's splendor. And Artha, I'm also going to talk about, to some extent, engaging according to our nature to connect with Krishna. And in Pravrutti, I'm going to talk about the concept of rasa from the Bhakti-Samvada Sindhu, how developing rasa, we often hear those terms like sthai bhav and uddipan and all the terms, vyabhichari bhav and all that. So what exactly those terms mean, and how exactly can we develop our attraction to Krishna. So that is going to be the focus of the last session. Thank you. Yes, Mataji?
Do we carry anarthas from our previous lives, right?
Yeah, okay. So do we carry anarthas from our previous life? Yes, of course. I mean, if we are not carrying, we are very fortunate. But most of us, we do have. They may not become manifest immediately. Like, even among children, we see some children are, they are, even when they are in the cribs, they are thinking, when am I going to take over the house? They are small, they are so dominant. I want this and I want this right now. And other kids are like gentle. They don't get so angry. You just leave them where they are okay. So we don't come as blank slates. We do have particular conditioning that come from our previous life, and they make us vulnerable in particular ways. but they also make us equipped in particular ways. So some of us may have more intellectual nature, then we can study Shastra more. Some of us may have more musical nature, then we can study, we can connect with Krishna through singing and music. So it's a mixed bag. We carry a lot from our previous life. Some of it is unfavorable to bhakti, and some of it is favorable to bhakti. So what is favorable, we use that, and what is unfavorable, we manage that. Okay? So thank you very much. Shri Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Gaur Ki.